Hi, my name is Matthew DeGeeter, Vice President of Education and Engagement at the American Society of Interior Designers. ASID brings to you Learn by Design at High Point Market, an exciting program of curated content featuring interior design industry leaders who will share insight on building and scaling your business, ensuring financial sustainability and growth, and managing client relationships. Walk away with the skills you need to help maximize your business profitability in 2020 and beyond. I'm thrilled to welcome you to the second of 3 programs in the ASID Learn by Design at High Point Market series, Can We Talk? Navigating Difficult Client Conversations. For you today, and I'm thrilled to turn things over to our moderator, Phyllis Harbinger, founder of Phyllis Harbinger Design and Business Consulting and principal, DCI Studio. Phyllis, are you ready to kick us off?
Hi, Matt. I am ready.
Hi, Phyllis. So happy to have you with us today.
It's great to be here with you.
I can hear you, I can see you, so I will let you take it from here.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Okay, so welcome everyone. I'm so excited to be here with you virtually and with our fellow panelists. I'm sure you will have at least a handful of difficult conversations with your clients as you go through your career as a professional designer. And I can tell you from my own experience that even our best and easiest clients can sometimes misconstrue the intent of an email, details of an order, or even the tone of a conversation. So today we're going to provide you with strategies that are going to help you navigate these difficult client conversations and other things that might come up, and we're going to give you tactics. So today I am joined by 3 incredible professional designers: Cheryl Luckett, the owner and principal designer of Dwell by Cheryl Interiors in Charlotte, North Carolina, and then Beth Diana Smith, owner and principal of her namesake firm, and John McClain, the owner and principal of his bi-coastal firm with offices in both Orlando and LA. So we have a very exciting group of people that are going to share their knowledge and wisdom with you. I'd like to give the panelists the chance to introduce themselves a little more in depth. Cheryl, would you please come on camera and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thank you, Phyllis.
You're welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, depending on where you are. My name is Cheryl Luckett. I am the owner and principal designer at Dwell by Cheryl Interiors, based in Charlotte, North Carolina, where I operate a boutique residential interior design firm. I came to interior design, much like many others, from a first career in corporate America, where I worked as a registered dietitian and subsequently a human resource professional. I side hustled for about 5 years, went back to school at night until I was able to build a life that I now enjoy. So I'm happy to be here.
Great. Well, thank you, Cheryl. And Beth, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hello, all. I am Beth Diana Smith of Beth Diana Smith Interior Design, and I own a boutique firm located in New Jersey. Very similar to Cheryl, interior design is my second career. My first career was actually in finance and accounting. And it was only through redoing my own home that the interior design bug bit me, and the bug bite has just never gone away. So I ended up transitioning full-time to design in 2014. And I just love everything about this career. And I really just love focusing on the discerning client that cares about the level of detail that I do.
Great. I love the bug bite. That's great. John, last but not least, would you tell us about yourself, please?
Hi. Nice to see you, Phyllis. How are you?
Nice to see you.
Hi, everybody. I'm John McClain. I have, as Phyllis had said, bi-coastal offices. So I live in LA. I have an office also in Orlando, Florida. And much like these other 2 gorgeous ladies, my design career is my second career. My first career was in business, as is my degree, which really provided so much help and expertise in coming into my design firm and understanding a lot of the things like we're going to talk about today on this program. But I always say I'm a designer by trade, I'm a designer by heart, and I'm a designer by tradition, because my family actually is this great group of skilled craftsmen and home builders that has really built this great foundation for me. But we're a residential design firm primarily, and I wouldn't trade this job for anything in the world. I'm so blessed, so happy, so lucky, so grateful for it, and grateful to be here.
Well, I'm grateful for all of you being here, and funny that we all discovered during our introductions prior to the seminar that we are all second careerists. I have a degree in international marketing and international relations, and then I went back to school for design. So we share a common history, I would say, and a lot of experiences that have commonalities that we're going to share with everybody today. So why don't we dive in? So the first question I have for our panel, if you had to choose one element of the client communication strategy that you're most passionate about, what would it be? Beth, can you start us off?
I would say for me it's standing for my value, which goes hand in hand with when to say no.
When to say no, that's so important. Thank you. And John, can you add your passionate strategy?
Well, for me, it's kind of like I try to come in heavy on the beginning, so I have a really long, detailed agreement, and I think this is going to be something that we're going to talk about later in the transparency part of everything. But I have really found that just managing those client expectations is something that is so important, and I know we're going to talk about that more too. But I kind of feel like that's my superpower, to be honest with you, in really understanding what that client needs and what they are maybe misunderstanding, or maybe what they just don't know.
I love the superpower relationship that you have there, because it sets up your mindset, and we all have to always think about our mindset. And if you truly believe that, that's going to definitely parlay to your client energetically. So thank you for sharing that. And Cheryl, can you tell us about your strategy that you're most passionate about?
So I really feel like the best defense is a good offense. And so really work hard to vet clients well in the beginning to ward off a lot of client issues. I come to this with a service mentality. Really, I feel like my gifting was given to me so I can serve people, but I also understand that I'm not meant to serve everyone. And their fit is important. It's important not just for me, but it's also important for the client. And so I put a lot of emphasis on the front end, really, to be a little bit more offensive when it comes to client communication and interaction.
Such great insights into how you all delve into your client strategy that we're sharing today. So in our next question, we're still all in the midst of this pandemic, and we don't know how long it's going to last or where it's going to take us. So how have your relationships with clients shifted because of the need for social distance? For me, a huge pain point is the extended delivery delays. The clients do not understand, no matter that we have this incredible, horrible excuse. So what have you run into? Cheryl, can you take this one?
Yeah, definitely, much like you. Probably the biggest issue I've had with clients has been managing the expectations around the delays. And it's really starting to become an issue as we are getting longer into the COVID pandemic, and the delays are seeming to mount. So I know for me, when this all started, we were in the middle of some projects and really weren't able to anticipate, no one anticipated this. So we weren't able to anticipate what we were going to be running into later down the road. So it's hard to communicate on the front end. So I've had to honestly remain really flexible. You know, we have a process and systems, but these are uncharted territories. And I've had to do some partial installs, which is not usually my thing, but, you know, understanding that we're all trying to do the best that we can, and clients have really been appreciative of those extra efforts, you know, you being flexible. I had a client last week who was delivering a baby, and I was working on a nursery, and so babies don't keep. So I had to do what I had to do to pull together, you know, you don't have this piece, let's move something from another room. So I think you have to, in this kind of environment, you've got to remain flexible. So much like you, Phyllis, I think the delays have been the biggest issue.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that story that you just shared is just so much of what we do normally, but it's even heightened here. John, can you share some of your experiences with these wonderful delays we're having?
Yeah, I mean, and it's just honestly past the point of even delays. You know, when COVID first started, we were all in a panic, right? It was like chickens with our head cut off, running around bumping into each other, like, what do we do? What do we do? So I immediately made this kind of conscientious decision to take that COVID bull by the horns and really take control of that situation with our clients. And so immediately I sent out an email saying, like, here's where we are, here's what's happening, here's what we know, here's what we don't know, here's what I plan on doing. And then from there, I kept daily communications with clients. And then some of them were emails, some of them were phone calls, but a lot of that was just to sort of, hopefully lessen their scare of everything and make them feel a little more comfortable. And then we did a lot of great protocols for if we are on the job site, when we were able to come out. I let them know we are following the strictest of standards. And this was before even, standards were a thing. I had probably a 20 list requirement for my tradespeople, for my team, for the client that they had to follow. And I think by grabbing that and letting them know that I was on top of it, it really made them, I don't know, they were just less antsy about everything, I feel. And we were able to pick up on some projects and not only continue them, but grow them even more than what they were pre-COVID, thankfully. And then, my team too, I let them know this is a time to over-communicate with clients. I have probably talked to more clients during COVID and the quarantine and the shutdown directly one-on-one than I have ever, except when I first started my career and I was a solo entrepreneur. Now I have different designers working with me, and my clients like it, and I'm probably going to continue that after this whole crazy thing is over, because I really like that I am there on that really granular level with them for their project, and they like it too. So one thing that I can just say is over communication is vital for any firm. Right now, you should be over communicating with your clients to the point of like, oh, it's John again, right? Like, let me put that down, because like that's where they need to know you're there. They need to know that you care, and they need to know that you have at least some sort of a plan in place to take care of them and their project.
I think that's great. And, that brings us to talking about these more dynamic and complex client relationships that we're having now, and the need to be able to communicate on multiple platforms all the time with your clients, because they're as frightened as we are about the unknown. So I think the more that you can manage their expectations, Cheryl, as you were saying, and minimize the potential conflicts, the better off we're all going to be. And our clients are going to enjoy the design journey even during this crazy time that we're in. I created a what to expect when you work with DCI Studio document years ago, and that was really incredible. And then to piggyback on that, creating the protocols of how we work when we're in the home with a client, or how we work as a team. So I think all of that is so important, because if you can manage those expectations from the get-go, you're going to set yourself up for success. So what other strategies and tactics can you share, Beth, with us? Where do you see the biggest gaps now in this pandemic?
For me, it's really about constant reminders in a way that feels more like positive reinforcement. So it kind of really goes back to what John is saying, is you just over communicating. And even when it comes to things that relate to what have been in the contract or something that I told them 3 weeks ago, I'm not going to remember something that was in a 6-page document. And sometimes I don't even remember something that happened yesterday, let alone
Right.
So I don't expect my client to do that either. So it's a lot of, we're going to do this, 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 and this. Based on our conversation yesterday, you may recall X, Y, and Z. And that's really what it kind of boils down to, is just always making them feel like you're engaged. And right now during COVID, it's also making them feel like you are empathetic. When COVID first started, I sent everyone, all my clients, and some past clients, like custom face masks, like stay safe. I haven't forgotten about you. We still have a house to design, but I'm thinking of you as a human versus my paying client. And I think that really resonated with a lot of my clients. And even now, like, there's also been all that constant communication. You're also building a personal relationship. Mm-hmm. You gotta keep that fine line though, but that has also been really important in keeping the communication constant in such a time where everything is very, very high stress. For me, I found that to be very helpful.
That's wonderful. I love the face mask, the custom face mask. That's great. I actually got one for my birthday a few weeks ago from one of my team members, and it had our logo imprinted on it, which was wonderful. When I wear it at the job site, it's professional, so it's great.
It's those little things.
The little things.
Right.
Yes.
It's just checking on them versus checking on their project
Yes.
goes a long way.
And how are you? How's the family? Is everybody safe? That's always so important. John, I know you gave us a little bit of your strategy in the last question. Do you have anything that you wanted to add? Another note, maybe? Or
Well, I agree with Beth. I mean, like, we're humans, right? We're all human beings in this. And so there is that level that we have to relate to our clients on and let them know that we're there for them. And, you know, back to the managing expectations, maybe a client doesn't know when something's going to be delayed, or maybe they just assume that everything's fine, and maybe they just don't know. And, you know, that's what I always say is clients don't know what they don't know, and it's kind of our job to let them know these things. And whether it's an improvement on a material in their home or a new design plan, I think that all of that is just, there should be no assumptions is what I'm trying to say. And I think for a lot of new designers too, I think that we just assume that everyone is on the same page with us. And I try to instill that in my team to not assume that everybody understands the process that we do and understands how this is going to possibly be delayed, possibly, you know, even delay the project, possibly even push it into next year. Who knows if it's a massive construction. So that human level is super, super critical that Beth is discussing, super critical.
So I'm certain that you've all had to play the role of mediator in your client relationships. I know I have. And they don't teach this in design school. Anyone out there that's a student watching, it's not taught. You have to make sure that you take the reins on that one. So while we might not have trained as social workers or psychologists, I'm a professor at FIT adjunct, and I always counsel my students to take a minimum of 2 psychology classes or make it your minor, because it will go such a long way to your success in this business, especially in the residential realm, I have to say. There's even more client communication issues in the residential than there are in other aspects of design. So that's proven priceless in my career. You know, in the relationships that you have with your clients, what's your practice? Can you share your steps that you take to mitigate conflict with your clients? Cheryl, can you talk about this for us?
Yeah, communication is such a big part of it. You're totally right on the understanding the psychology of just people in general. I think it's so important to be able to read the room. And I know we all came to design from other careers, and there's so many transferable skills that I can identify from my past career. One of them, as it relates to communication, is our sales force used to use DISC profiling. It's similar to Myers-Briggs to identify the personality type. DISC was dominant, influential, conscientious, and steady. And so I'm constantly putting clients through that filter. Like, is this a dominant individual? Is this someone who wants just the facts, really quick, straight to the point? Don't give me all the fluff and all the details. I need high level. So it's really important to understand who you're dealing with. That often can mitigate conflict. But it's also important to understand the dynamics within. Often in the residential environment, we might be working with couples, families, more than one contact. And so you have to understand the relationship dynamics and adjust accordingly. So we really have a tough job, and it requires a lot of skill, a lot of flexibility, and a lot of knowledge around communication.
Thank you so much. And Beth, can you give us a little of your insight on this?
Absolutely. I wholeheartedly believe that interior designers, we are very much like knockoff psychiatrists. And I find myself mediating a lot, especially if my client is a couple. I found myself in that situation many, many times where they're arguing over like a design element or like the budget, and I'm there and I'm like, okay, well, this is awkward. So a lot of times I'm like, okay, let's bring it back full circle. I'm trying to be neutral, but I'm also trying to address their concerns. Obviously, there's usually one side that I agree with, but it's really about making the other person feel like their question is being addressed, you are answering them, you make them feel that you care, but here's the reason why that may or may not be a good or bad idea. So for me, that's always been really, really helpful. As long as it's very much like human nature. If someone feels like you genuinely care about them, they're just going to say, okay, I trust you. I know you're not going to lead me in the wrong direction. And similar to Cheryl, like, and what I learned in corporate was SMART. As long as it was specific, measurable, attainable, I forget what the R is, and then timely, then that's kind of really still how I operate and how I try to communicate. I'm always being very specific because I don't like vague, so I try not to be that way with clients.
Right. I think people want to be heard, and they want to know that their ideas are as relevant, even if we feel that one side, as you said, is more apparent than the other. I'm having this struggle now with a client that's two women who are married. One is the daughter of the other client who's 92. And you could just begin to imagine the drama that ensues in this relationship. So I actually have outed myself and said, I'm the mediator here. And I want everyone to be happy with the result. You won't always get exactly what you want, but we have to make sure that at the end of the day, you feel that there's a good equilibrium here, that it's weighted, and that you're all valued in the decisions that are made. So I think that that's so important. John, did you want to add anything else? Or?
Yeah, I do. I think respect, as everyone has said, is super critical. So you, as Beth said, you respect both sides, you listen to both sides, but as also she said, I think if you have a good reason to why this is the better answer, to why this is the best solution, don't just say, oh yeah, that's the best thing to do. Like that doesn't cut it for some people. You have to really tell them the reasoning behind it. And I think that I have found solve so many problems. And another little tip, if you have two people in a home who, when you're designing, they both need to be there for contract discussions, they both need to be there for design meetings, they both need to be there for the big reveal, whatever you're doing that's related to that project, require that they're both there, because you're going to be doing double duty and explaining yourself 14 times about the same chair and why you chose that fabric to every family member of that home. So that's really something that I do, and that's a requirement for me with all my clients.
And you don't want to have to repeat the performance because you're not getting paid to repeat the performance. So always think about your bottom line in that, but also that both people, legally need to be responsible for the decisions that are made, because this is a business decision that they're making. Whether or not it's residential, commercial, hospitality, it doesn't matter. It's still a business decision. So that's a wonderful tip, John. Thank you for sharing that.
Also, one little thing too, like it is a business, and I think by you saying that, so many of us are people pleasers, and we're so passionate about what we do, and so you have to kind of push that aside. And you're not a non-for-profit. This is something that you love to do, but you need a paycheck to pay the bills too.
Absolutely.
So always think about the business side of everything you do. And I always say everything's a sales call, no matter if it's with your vendor, no matter if it's with your customer. You're always trying to convince them to do something, right? So I tell my team, always go into it with that approach of like you're there to convince them to do whatever for whatever reason that you feel is right for the project.
That's terrific.
To add on to that, in
Sure.
my contract, because maybe it's my background and I'm very cognizant of my bottom line. In my contract, they have to, even if they're a married couple, you have to designate a primary decision maker, and that's in their contract.
That's an interesting tactic.
I don't try to pull that card often. I really haven't, but it's in there because, especially now, everyone's schedule is different, and there's a lot of times where I've had a client where one traveled often. I can't delay your project because you're going to be in Timbuktu for 2 months. So you have to designate this primary decision maker. I'll keep you updated, but we gotta keep the project rolling along regardless of where you're.
I think that's a fabulous tip, Beth, and thank you for sharing that. And we're talking about team. So I personally have been known to describe my team more holistically. I don't only include my design team in our decisions, but I go to that extra layer, which is our vendors and our contractors, which are part of my team. Without them, we can't do what we do. So without these talented people that we know, like, and most importantly trust, we really can't run our projects. I'm sure you'd all agree with that. And yet I know that there have been some challenging moments in my career about communication with subs and my team, and also with clients. I'd love to hear from all of you what some of those challenging moments have been. Beth, can you start us off?
Sure. Actually, I had to write a few notes around this. I think it's really important to work with people you trust. That's the first one. And it's really, especially being a woman in this business, I think it's important to keep in mind you should never be a doormat. For those of you that have met me, I am barely scratching 5 feet. So when people meet me, they see this very petite woman and they think that they can sometimes bulldoze over me, but that's not my personality type. So a lot of times I have to put people in their place in a very professional and nice way. And a lot of it boils down to don't confuse confrontation with communication. You can have a tough decision, a tough conversation with someone without it being uncomfortable. It's really about how you're saying it and being very clear, like, here are your roles and responsibilities and here are mine. Don't come over into my realm again.
Stay in your space. Stay in your lane, right? John, how do you create a harmonious atmosphere regarding power struggle?
Well, again, it's about respect, and it's about understanding where they're coming from. Is it coming from like a financial aspect? Is one person worried about the price of something? Is the other person worried more about the comfort of it? Like, that's important. There's always that trade who feels like they're a designer, who feels like they can figure out this kitchen design better than you can, or they know that tile better than you. And it is, again, about nicely saying, okay, listen, we're all a team here. We're all a part of the same outcome. We want this to be beautiful. I respect you for this. You respect me for that. Let's do what we're really, really best at. And I'm so afraid that designers are afraid of confrontation and afraid of just objecting to what they hear, because I think that so many of us just want a beautiful project that we're going to just kind of roll over. And honestly, in the beginning, I did too. When I was younger, new designer, I kind of got my chops by figuring out things the hard way, the school of hard knocks, if you will. And what I learned from that is you have to be direct. Like, you have to be direct, and you have to say what you feel. By you being wishy-washy in a moment that's critical for the decision and the movement forward of the project, you're not only delaying it, you're costing yourself more time and money, you're costing your subs more money, your client more money. That's not good. So if you know what you say, and if you truly feel what you say is the right answer and the right solution to that, stick by it. Like, don't be afraid to voice your opinion. You're the professional designer in the situation. Yes, you have these people who support you and work with you, but you're the one who really is ultimately responsible for that design coming to fruition and being the beautiful and functional design that it is.
Yeah, I think being authentic and being true to yourself, if you're not putting it out there and telling a client, listen, I know this is the best, whatever it is, for you. I have your best interests at heart. You need to trust that. And I think that it's difficult for younger designers to do that. When you've already got a lot of experience under your belt, it's easier. But you're talking about authenticity and transparency, which actually brings us to our next topic of discussion. So when we talk about transparency, which has become a huge buzzword over the last few years, not just in the design industry, but overall in our world in a global sense. And then since the onset of COVID, it's become even more of a hot topic. So clients ask questions in our realm such as, are you cost transparent? Do you charge hourly, or do you charge a flat fee? Or do you have a hybrid approach, perhaps? Cheryl, if you had to think of your one-liner, because I know you have a great one that I want you to share with our audience, what would it be?
I think it's important to be upfront. Like I said, be very transparent. But for me, I feel like it's a value of communicating, using this teachable moment to communicate why I'm here. Yes, we're cost transparent. Yes, we charge a flat fee. But I want them to understand more why they're hiring me. This is not a furniture purchasing business. I'm not a furniture store, and I'm not here to just provide furnishings. You can easily go to any furniture store, and they will gladly help you pick out a sofa and pillows that coordinate. I am here to create a home that is a reflection of who you are, the life that you live, and that's a representation, of you. And that's what you're paying me for. And so I think that the conversation, it comes veiled, but a lot of times it's a lack of understanding of the value that I'm bringing to the table. And so that's my opening to explain the value of an interior designer. And I think once we get that out of the way, they understand that, oh, she's bringing me more than I expected. I called her because I needed furnishings, but when she leaves, I'm going to have a home that I'm proud of. And I feel like we miss the boat sometimes on that, on communicating that value.
Yeah, that's great advice, and it really is a value add proposition that you have to communicate to your clients. John, what's your best line in response to those questions that clients ask you?
Well, I love this whole transparency topic. I think if anybody takes anything away from this panel today, is transparency is key. For me, anyway, I see it as key to your livelihood as a business owner in general, not even just in design industry. So please be transparent. But also, whenever there's an issue or whenever there's a problem, I always try to stop and put myself back into that client's brain and see why they're feeling that way or why they're thinking that. And I will tell you, 9 times out of 10, it rolls downhill right back to me, and I can find somewhere where I missed the communication. But I always like to tell clients, I use a little thing called common sense. And I use this line all the time, and clients, if you're watching, you've heard this, but I use a little thing called common sense because I want them to know that not many people really use common sense anymore. And if this isn't working for you, whether it's the product or frankly, whether it's the entire project, like if that's not working, then we're both going to use common sense and we're going to figure out a solution to it, or we're going to move on in our different ways, because that does happen sometimes. Let's be honest. Everything does not end with those amazing warm and fuzzies. We want them to, but there's always that one time where you really have to stop and use your common sense. So just don't model yourself after so many other people. Like try to think about what you would do in that situation and really put your own personal spin on it, because when you apply your own common sense to something and your own reasoning behind it, the client will appreciate and value what you're saying 10 times more than if you just filled out some random comment off that you found online.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And Beth, do you want to add anything to this topic?
Sure. I would say for me, I really operate my brand as what you see is what you get. We are going to laugh. We are going to joke around. You are going to hear like all my strange little sayings when I just design with you, but you're also going to see the very OCD part of me. You're going to see the perfectionist part of me. I want the client to feel like she's going to treat my home like she would treat, her own home. I recently told a client 2 weeks ago, I was like, something's off with the art in the bedroom. I'm going to move everything over 1 inch. And then she went home and she saw it. She was like, there's nothing wrong with it. I was like, it is, and it's off by 1 inch. And she was just like, I'm not going to debate it because you already feel like it has to move 1 inch. But it's like those little quirky things, those strange examples where the client feels like, all right, well, Beth is going to be just as crazy about my house. So it's part of like trusting the process. I think that's all it boils down to. As soon as you win the client's trust and you are showing you are transparent, that it just makes everything go so much smoother.
It does. And I think that, the transparency is one thing, but also that you've communicated your value and the importance of working with someone that you know, like, and trust. We all want to work with people we know, like, and trust. And so our clients want the same thing. So that brings us to our final topic of the afternoon. How do you each communicate your values and navigate that subject with your team first? And some of you have already talked about how you navigate with your clients, but I'd love to hear from all three of you on how you navigate with your team, and then if there's anything more you want to interject about your clients, that would be wonderful too. Whatever we can give to our audience, nuggets, gems, I think they'll so appreciate. So Cheryl, will you start us off?
Yeah, so for me, it goes back to those transferable skills that I talked about. My last 5 years in corporate was in corporate HR and strategy. I worked in diversity and inclusion, and I directed that for a large segment of our business. And we would have these annual strategic summits where we would plan out, our strategy for the year. We would discuss our core values, make sure everyone is in alignment. I'm a 2-person team, but we still do that. I did that alone when I was a solopreneur. Like, what are my values? I need to know them first so that I can communicate them. I was listening to Beth Diana talk about the care and concern that she had for her client's project. That translates. Like, they might not understand that it's wrong, but if your core value is I'm going to have some character and I'm going to do this in the way that I would do it for myself, and even if you don't know it's wrong, I am so married to your project and so invested that second best is not going to be good enough, because I wouldn't want second best. And I feel like when you identify those core values, when you communicate that to the team, they get on board, and then we're able to then tell that same story to our clients. So I say in our initial meetings, one of our core values is stewardship. I feel like I am a steward over your home, whatever part of the project we're working on. And if you've got something that I feel like is usable, I'm going to be a steward of that. I'm not going to just toss it out because I can, because I'm the designer. I feel like I have a responsibility to do what's best for them, and to give them the best. And everybody on my team understands that, and that's how we approach all that we do, through those lens of those values.
And I think that that's such an important point, Cheryl. And, you know, your team is representing your brand, because we're all owners and principals of our firms, and you have to make sure that people are mirroring back out into the world, whether it's your clients, your subs, you know, whoever it is that they're interacting with, that they are mirroring your brand and the expectations and the values that you want them to represent. So that's a really important point. John, can you tell us a little bit about how you handle that aspect of design?
Yeah, I always start with every client initial meeting, and I let them know we have to have a synergy during that meeting. And if there's not some common ground that we all find that we feel we can move forward on the project on, then I don't. And that's just something that it's hard to hear it, it's hard to do, it's hard to turn down a project like that sometimes. But one thing I've learned is if you force a project with a client that you have that inner feeling about is going to turn into something bad, or that it's going to be that problematic client, then you need to listen to yourself and you need to be honest with the client. Don't just say, I'm so busy, I can't take on your project. Like, be completely honest and say, this is not the right fit. And if they push it, you can actually tell them why. Usually I just say it's not a right fit, they move on, and then they go from there. But listen to your gut and don't just take on things. I know we all need the financial part of our business sometimes, but you're gonna neglect the quality of the project, and you're going to have a lot of sleepless nights over that. And then back to what Cheryl was saying, you know, I think when we start off as a solo entrepreneur, and a lot of us did that, we were just, you know, one person show in the beginning, it's easier to make sure that your values are conveyed to clients, to trades, to whomever you do associations with. When I started adding team members, I'm up to 5 team members now, and as I was doing that, I really wanted them to sort of learn by osmosis. I wanted them to go with me on a client call. I wanted them to see how I talk to this tradesperson. And I really wanted them to emulate that. And so much to the point that I even have scripts written out for them on certain responses to certain issues that happen along the way. There's very little that I'm not seeing at this point. I mean, please God, don't send anything else my way that I don't know, but there's very little that I can't produce a response for that I haven't seen before, you know, whether it's a delay or whether it's an issue with communication, whatever. And I let my team know you can have these responses. They're not canned responses, but they're a response that I know gets a result that benefits both sides. So if you're growing your team, and if you're moving from being a solo entrepreneur into even adding 1 more or 2 more people on, it is critical that you let them know how you started your company, why you started your company, what your values are, how you like to be treated, and also stand by do what you say and say what you do. I tell my team, like, stand behind what we say, because I don't ever want a client wondering. If a client has to call our office asking about something, there's a problem. If we have not told them something ahead of time, that's a problem for me, because I want them to communicate on the forefront rather than waiting for the client to react or something. So I think that just that emulation of what you do and why you really started your company is critical. And I even tell my team, it's cheesy, but I say, you're all small business owners. You're under my company, but I want you to treat this client as your own business, how you would like to be treated. And it's worked out great so far.
That's great advice. And, you know, you've created a roadmap. Maybe those are part of your ops manual. And if you don't have an ops manual and you have a team, get an ops manual in place. There are a lot of people out there that can help you with that. I created a book of checklists because I created checklists for all of my employees. I had a lot of my team was virtual before it was a word. and I needed a way to manage them without being a helicopter manager. So I would go the first time with the checklist, take them through it, and then they had a roadmap like you've created in a different way where they could go out and feel that they could own this process and do it without constantly coming back to us. So I think that all of those are really important tactics.
Can I say one more thing? Phyllis, one more thing. On your operations manual topic, if you're in the process of writing one, have your team members write it for you, write certain parts of it for you, because
fantastic advice.
Then they're never going to forget it, and then you review it, of course, but if they write it, they're going to know what the process is, and they're even able to teach other people. So just a little tip.
Yeah, and they're going to feel invested in the process, too, because they have ownership.
Yes.
Beth, can you tell us a little bit about your tactics on this realm?
I actually want to, something John said made me think, and I feel like this may bring it full circle. There was only one time where I turned down a client that I ended up taking them on. And it's because she asked me, why won't you take my project? And I am, for those of you who know me personally, I am a straight shooter. So I told her, I was like, you don't communicate well. And for me, I cannot operate or run your project to my best ability with someone who does not communicate. You have not responded to emails in a year, and now you're coming back wanting to work, and I just can't do that. And she apologized, and she told me her why, and she promised she wouldn't do it again. And I can be a sap sometimes, so I took her project, and it was great. It was actually in design, and she was very responsive, because then she had in her mind, like, if I don't communicate with Beth, she's not going to be happy. And it's all going to be a teachable moment, and that's for both me and the client. So be who you are with your client at all times, and get it in writing, put it in your contract.
Yeah, that's great advice. Great advice.
I said the truth shall set you free. I mean, like you were transparent. I love that conversation. I've said it in similar ways. But sometimes you are not the client. Like, they need to understand this is not about me not wanting your project. I feel like I'm not the best person to serve you, right? That's way easier to digest than I don't want your project. That's not going over very well. But
I don't know. If they're being mean, I may just say I don't want your project if they're really mean to me.
I can't imagine you doing that.
Oh, well.
You sound like someone who likes to do things this way, and I'm not that person. The way I work best is this way, and I really feel like you would have a better experience if you went a different direction.
I think we all kind of take on projects that we get so excited about, and if it's a beautiful home and we're so ready to design it and whatever, and then the client was like, no, I have to use my grandma's sofa, and it's going to stay in that same fabric, and then all these other things intermix in with there. So I've told my team, like, you know what, we do some projects that are going to be in the portfolio, they're going to be on the website, and then some projects, honey, they just pay the bills. They just pay the bills, and we just move on from it, and we still love them, and we got them what they wanted, but they're happy, and we just move on.
That's such good advice, John. And really, you have to really go into your gut as a business owner, because especially in the beginning when you're hustling and you think every project is a win, it's just not. And I think we can all agree that they come back to bite you in more ways than you could ever anticipate or imagine. Yes, and it's not a good thing, because when you have that negative energy in a project, it permeates to your team and it permeates to other projects. So just take the advice that's given here today. And I know it's really hard and people are struggling right now, especially during COVID, but you're actually hurting your bottom line by taking a project that is not an ideal fit for you. And, it can be an ideal fit and not go in your portfolio, but it still has to be an ideal fit for the communication and flow throughout the design process.
Yes.
So I think that's super, super important for you all to think about. I also think that when they start to test you on budget and cost, you really, really need to think about it. I had a client years ago when fax machines were still in works, and I sent my contract. In those days, I used to send it that way, and they're faxing me back, crossing out my fees. And this went on for 2 or 3 fax back and forth where I said, no, I'm sorry, it's not negotiable. And I finally said, you need to stop. This is never going to work, because if this is a problem now before we've signed a contract, it's going to persist, and I just don't think I'm the right person for you. I wish you well. Please don't send this back again. You know, I couldn't believe what was happening. And, you know, it's really interesting how certain people in certain cultures, they're wired to bargain. I mean, it's just part of the way they're culturally wired. But it just doesn't work for me. And so even though I needed money, I was just starting out, I stood in my power and said no. So saying no and setting your boundaries, I think, is such an important part of what we do. So I think maybe we have time for 1 or 2 more comments before we take questions. Does anybody want to add any final words, final notes that we can share to give our audience some sage advice?
I think the honesty is so important with what we talked about. Like I always say, I want to lay my head on my pillow at night and not have any qualms or worries about what I did that day. I want to know that I treated my vendors right. I wanted to know that I treated my clients right, and my tradespeople. So for me, that peace of mind that I did the right thing during the day, whatever that situation was and however I handled it, is much more important than any financial situation I can gain from a project.
Yes, I would agree with you. You have to be able to sleep at night. So always make sure that you're doing things that are transparent and also true to yourself and your clients. Beth, do you have any last words that you want to share?
I would say I think after every project, it's safe to say that we all learn something.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you need to add that something into your contract, because you also have to protect yourself the way you protect your client. But I also think it's very important that there are times you will find yourself that you also need to protect your subcontractor or sometimes your GC, and there are things that you should just make sure that you address. So after each project, you may need to review and just say, you know what, I don't like that this happened, or that wasn't clear enough in my contract, or I didn't like what my client tried to do. Let me update that. That would be my one, please do that thing. Update.
Yeah, that's great advice. Everybody really think about your contract as an organic living document, because I have changed over the last 30 years my contract so many times, because we learn from every single experience. We're constant students. We're students until the day we die. So always think about the fact that you are always going to learn something, as Beth said, from every project, because you will. And there will be something new, no matter how experienced you are, that you could not have imagined comes up. So look at every project as a learning opportunity, and then take that learn, and maybe it was a win, maybe it was a learn, but take it and use it to create more value in how you structure your business. Cheryl, do you have any parting comments that you want to share?
Yeah, I'd say extend yourself a little grace. I mean, every now and then somebody is going to slip through the cracks. Somebody's going to, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde you. Like, those are honestly, as I think back, I haven't had a lot of, thankfully, knock on wood, I haven't had a lot of difficult conflict with clients, but the times that I have, those were the projects that taught me the most. Those were the projects that helped me establish boundaries, that helped me learn, especially if you're a newer designer, I feel like this is important, because it takes a while to get to a point where you understand who I'm serving, what I'm doing, who's my ideal client. And you run into a lot of that push and pull that really makes you maybe doubt that you're on the right path, but show yourself some grace, use those as learning lessons, because you probably will look back and say thanks to those clients who taught you so much and helped you to be able to become the designer that you aspire to be.
Yeah, especially, we're all second careerists, so we were not right out of school when we went into this business. But if you're a student, please take notes, from what everybody has given you today. And if you're an emerging professional or someone that's deciding to go out on your own and leave a firm, think about how that is going to be in your journey, because you will learn every single day. And even all of these seasoned professionals that are sharing their advice with you, we're still learning. So just know, and as Cheryl said so beautifully, give yourself some grace. Don't sweat the small stuff, and the big stuff, learn from it. So I want to thank everybody today, and hopefully we have some questions. Matt, do we have questions?
We do. I'm
Awesome.
really enjoying this conversation, and I think there's a really great theme I'm noticing in this that from all the feedback that you're providing, which is you train others how to treat you at the end of
Love
the
it.
day. So if there's something within your contract, within those lessons as you move forward, so it's something really helpful to keep in mind, and I'm especially if you're just starting out in your own firm, because you need that fee, you need that project, but also how are you setting up your business as a result of that, and what are you training yourself into? But we have a couple of audience questions I think that would be very interesting to hear your perspectives on. One in particular is, how do you handle disputes between spouses? So, because it may not be that you have the conflict with your client, but what if they're having a conflict with each other? I know we've mentioned, I think Beth, you said in particular of who's the decision maker or something like that. So you know who that has to go to. But any words of advice of how you've had to navigate that in the past?
I would say for me, depending on the tone, I may stop it right then and there, or I will give them about 60 seconds to get it all out, and then I'll shut it down. And I do that because if I see that the emotion between them is heightened, then it has to come out. So get it out while I'm here before it can escalate. But usually I'll say, okay, let's take a step back and let's just think about what the issues are. I'm just going to call them Kevin and Pearl. Kevin, you said X, Y, and Z. Here's definitely the things that I agree with. Pearl, here are the things that I agree with. I'm always going to do the positive first. And anything that I don't like, I'm going to save for last. And that goes back to based on what you want to do, here's the issue. Sometimes that issue is that it's not realistic, or that we can do it if you want to invest X amount of more budget, but based on the current budget, we can't. Same thing. Usually I get this issue with Pearl though. And it's the same thing. And sometimes you really have to distinguish what's the dynamic between them in general and what's the dynamic because of the design. And a lot of times it's because of how they are in general. So that's why I go back to, we're all really just knockoff psychiatrists, and you're basically trying to read the room, and you have to read the room when it comes to your client. And again, shut it down now or give them those 60 seconds.
Also, too, like, why are they fighting? Like, why, or what is the real issue? Is it because, like, I had a client and the husband had this table and it was this, it's horrendous. Like, guys, like, it was something that you wouldn't even put in your front yard or your backyard or anything. It's so bad. But the husband loved it so much. And so he had to have this in the house. So our compromise was, okay, why do you want it? My grandfather made it. It was passed along to me. I don't want to ever get it out of my home. So we turned that table into a desk for this client, right? So we put it on the platform, we raised it up, we're putting a glass top on it, everything. So the wife was like, wow, that's kind of cool and industrial looking right now. So now it's kind of different. I'm like, yeah, like, this is really like turning, something ugly into something pretty. But it was this great compromise where he was happy, she was happy. And once you get down to the nitty gritty and why the mentality behind it, I think you can usually solve it. But like Beth said, if they're a combative couple and they're always fighting and this is just, they just yell at each other on a constant basis, then that's just their mode of communication. And, I've heard F words fly back and forth, and then, oh, I love you, honey, at the end of that conversation too. So it's like, I don't know which personality I'm talking with, but like you said, get it out of their system, move on from it, and then they're usually fine at the end of it. If you see something really tragic, it's gonna hurt the design, you really have to stop it. But if there's a way that you can make it work somehow for them, even put it in a guest room, if it's a piece of furniture, I don't know. If there's some way to resolve that issue for both of them, they actually respect you more, and then you won't have that issue down the road if you solve that one problem right there. It will set you up better for the rest of the project.
Great. Are there other questions, Matt, that we can talk to?
We've got actually a couple more. We'll see how far we can get.
Okay.
A lot of these conversations also are wrapped around understanding when to say no potentially to a client. Do you have any, let's say, red flags or warning signs that as you get to know a client, that you get that gut feeling that says this isn't going to be the right fit, so you start to navigate at the beginning, or is there a moment in time where that helps you make that decision? Cheryl, you're nodding your head very quickly on this one.
But I think so much of that is this is an internal job. Like being a entrepreneur, you got to know who you are, number one, before you know who you can serve. That's number one. Like I can't figure out whether this is a good fit or a bad fit until I know what's the fit that I like, right? It's like going into a store and trying to buy a dress and you don't know what size you are. How do you know if you have no baseline? So once you establish that, I feel like you have to be upfront. I'm always looking, I know me, right? I know the way I like to design. I like the client to tell me what you want and then give me some space to deliver it. I'm not a collaborative. We're not gonna do this together. It's gonna be a back and forth. I need you to tell me what you want and then allow me to create something based on what you told me. Now, that's not everybody's style. So when I hear someone that I think on a discovery call, if I'm hearing that you like to collaborate, it's my responsibility at that point, before I've come to your house, before I've taken any of your money, to say, I'm sensing that you might like to collaborate with the designer. Our process is X, Y, and Z. So they know it's all out on the table. So if I'm going to hire Cheryl, I have to let Cheryl steer the ship. But that came from me understanding who I am and how I like to work, how I work best, which will ultimately be best for the client. And I think that is so important, identifying that first. So those red flags, I'm looking for, is it somebody that's controlling? You can hear that on a phone call. If they've said, I've worked with 5 designers and we just can't red flag. Like, there are things that I'm looking for, but it's really based on how I like to work.
I think you even hear it before the phone call. I think you hear it when they're like, no, I'm not going to complete that questionnaire because I don't have time to do it. And no, I don't value that because I don't care.
Yes.
Like, you even know before you get to that point. So those red flags can start before you even hear a voice speak on the other end of the line.
Right.
It's good. It's a good practice to put a questionnaire on your website, because you will weed out many people that are not your ideal client. So, and I think that it's okay to know if you're a control freak. I'm a control freak. I don't want anybody else, like Cheryl said, steering the ship. It's just not my game.
Yeah.
So it's really good to stand in your power and let people know this isn't going to be a good fit before you go down the rabbit hole.
Right, and I want to reiterate something that Cheryl said, is that you have to know who you are as a human.
Mm-hmm.
And use the example with the client that I ended up taking. I know I don't do well with people that do not communicate. It's a pet peeve. So I knew I would be a terrible designer for you because I may hate you if you don't communicate. So because I knew that about myself, hands down, that was something. So it really boils down to, that's not a general question. It's really specific to who you are and how you can handle it.
Thank you. All of this is great insight, and also thank you to the audience because you've been submitting some amazing questions, and also they've been giving a lot of great positive comments to all of you. So I just want you to hear that directly right now. So I'm going to try to have us do one quick other question. I'm sorry, audience, we only have time for this one last one, but I think it's a good one, and it's about boundaries. So essentially, like, how do you manage clients who actually, after you've set boundaries together, like working hours or how you communicate, who then maybe actually start to go outside of that consistently, let's say texts and calls on the weekend, or asking for multiple revisions passed? Like, so how do you start to navigate that process, or even that communication point?
I'll kind of start off this. Like Phyllis had said, I have a how we work document, and that how we work document, we really thought about it. Like, we don't give out cell phone numbers. I'm sorry, our clients do not have my cell phone. They don't have my team member's cell phone. So that was something that was important, because I was getting phone calls and texts at 11:30 at night from my drunk client saying, how do I turn on my shower? Because he couldn't figure it out. So you learn these things and you adapt as you go. But our how we work document, it spells out all of that. And then if a client moves past the point of, let's say they start doing multiple revisions, I do have in my agreement they get one revision based on our first presentation. If it moves past that point, I'm like, all right, you know what? We're in revision 3 now. Like, there's going to be an invoice generated, and then typically when you throw money into it and when you let them know that there's going to be a fee attached to that, it stops them, right? Because to them, it's just like, well, you can choose a new sofa in 5 minutes. It's no big deal, right? You do the other one in 5 minutes. Why can't you do this one, you know? And it's like, no, that 5 minutes took me 15 years to learn how to do, right? So for them, it seems so simplistic. And then for us, to me, the thing that they relate to is money. So when I come back and start adding on that hourly fee, even if it was for a flat fee agreement, it usually stops them in their track. It might be a little rough conversation, but they normally take it and stop doing it at that point, in my experience.
For me, the only thing I will add into that is a lot of the times when I have a client try to cross the boundaries, it's really about time and that reaching out. And a lot of times it's like, hi, Pearl, you know, I completely understand why you have that question. I'll get back to you during business hours. Have a great weekend. That's it.
Very nice.
I feel the same way. You know, I have friends that were clients that have become friends, and I think that's even more of a situation. There's a client that I'm working with right now who I've been working with for 20 years. We've traveled the world together, and she'll text me on the weekend, and I'll be like, hey, you know, I'm so glad to hear you're having a great weekend and that you're excited about this, but we'll talk about it on Monday. And, you know, just shut it down, because if you do not set the boundaries, not only are your clients going to continue to take advantage because they don't think they're taking advantage because you haven't told them anything, but you're going to hate yourself. And when you're angry at yourself about them, you're going to put that energy on them as well. So it's just a lose-lose situation. Set the boundaries, have the conversation, do it in the way in which we've all given you tactics to handle it, and just go on with your life and know that you're doing the right thing for you and for them.
And don't confuse boundary with confrontation. I
No.
can't say that enough. You can communicate with them without feeling like it's going to turn into something bigger. You're a business owner, own it.
Yes.
And
And
Phyllis,
your fears are not theirs.
No, and that whole friends and family thing too, by the way, is a whole different conversation that I could talk
Yes,
about.
it is.
I have gone down that path that seems so nice and easy, and it has turned out rough and rocky waters at the end of the day. So that whole friends and family thing has made me actually revise my design agreement and revise my how we work document. So yeah, that's tricky, really tricky.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. I mean, I think also that question I think was a great way to wrap this up in particular, with how to set those boundaries. And Beth, I think the way you just summed that up is great. Boundary is not conflict. And so setting boundaries is actually for everyone's success. And so it's also about that, you know, communicate openly and be a part of that conversation because you're a team in whatever dynamic and way you want to work with a client, if it is collaborative or not, or other process. And you have to understand that for yourself. So there's a lot of learning about your process. So I just want to give a huge thank you to Phyllis for moderating, John, Beth, Cheryl for participating and sharing all of your insights. I'm going to let you all sign off and I will wrap up for us, but a huge thank you for being part of Learn by Design at High Point Market for us. We really appreciate you.